Bright QT. Every student matters.
Shock therapy in post communist regimes. What is this shock therapy? The collapse of communism was followed in most countries by a painful process of transition from an authoritarian socialist system to a democratic capitalist system. Now, what was that communism followed by? Many countries, those who were in the bloc of USSR, and they were collapsed now. So they were under the communism. But now they were slowly and gradually moving towards the socialist, from socialist system to democratic capitalist system. Because now they wanted harmonious and prosperous atmosphere in their countries. They wanted to rise up, which was not possible in communism. So the model of transition in Russia, Central Asia, and East Europe that was influenced by the World Bank and IMF came to be known as shock therapy. Shock therapy is a painful process of transition from an authoritarian socialist system to democratic capitalist system. And this was influenced by the World Bank and IMF came to be known as shock therapy. And rooting out all Soviet systems, private ownership was a dominant pattern of ownership. Privatization of state assets and corporate ownership were brought in. And the collective farms were replaced by private farms. And development in trade and complete switchover to free trade and foreign direct investment were the main engine of change. And each state from this bloc was directly linked to the West and not to each other. And the Western capitalist states now became the leaders and guided and controlled the development of these regions. The shock therapy did not lead the people to the promised utopia of mass consumption and it brought ruin to their economies. In Russia, large state controlled industry collapsed as about 90% of its industries were put up for sale to private individuals and companies. This was called the largest garage sale in the history. The citizens were given vouchers to participate in the sales, but most of them sold it in black markets because they needed money. And the market was not providing them that much amount, that much cost, which was actually required. So, just to meet their expenses, they sold it in black markets. And the value of ruble declined dramatically. The rate of inflation was so high, the loss of all their savings. Collective farm system disintegration, leaving people without food security, and Russia started to import food as well. See how a superpower is declining day by day just because of their own mistakes. Sometimes what happens, in communism, people are rigid. They don't want to move here and there. There is no flexibility. And the only motive is the socialism. So what happens? The people have to suffer in that way. And people have to just suffer in all the aspects. So the old system of social welfare was systematically destroyed, and the withdrawal of government subsidies pushed people into poverty. The middle classes were pushed into the periphery of society and the academic intellectuals migrated. A mafia emerged in most of these countries and started controlling many economies. Obviously, people would take undue advantage and they would convert into mafias. And privatization led to new disparities. Post Soviet states, especially Russia, were divided between the rich and the poor regions. Now, rich were becoming more rich and poor were becoming more poor, and there was a big difference between both. And there was great economic inequality between the people. The construction of democratic institutions was not given the same attention as economic institutions, because normally what happens in democracy, people are liberal, which communism doesn't allow. And the constitutions of most of the countries were drafted very fast, including Russia with a strong presidential head. In Central Asia, the president had great powers and several became very authoritarian. And the presidents of Turkmenistan or Uzbekistan appointed themselves to power for 10 years and extended for another 10 years. They allowed no dissent or opposition. A judicial culture and independence were yet to be established. So that means they just moved towards the capitalization and the democratization, but exactly there was sense of communism, or we could say dictatorship, was still there. What was the, let's revise it. What was the effect of shock therapy of Russia? Industrial complex almost collapsed as about 90% of industries were sold out. And how did Russia benefit from Indo-Russian relationship? Russia stands to benefit from the relationship because India is the second largest and arms market for Russia. The Indian military gets most of the hardware from Russia. And highlight any one consequence of shock therapy. In Russia, the large state-controlled industrial complex almost collapsed as about 90% of the industries were put up for sale to private individuals and companies at throwaway prices, called as the largest garage sale in history. And why is falling of Berlin Wall considered as an evidence of collapse of bipolar world? Germany was dividing during the period of bipolarity, and Eastern Germany and Western Germany were the parts of Soviet Union and USA respectively. In 1989, the Berlin Wall was toppled, and Germany, which was divided into Second World War, was unified, and Germany, after being divided into two parts, came under the dominance of USA, and Soviet Union was disintegrated after some time. In this way, bipolar world also collapsed. Why did Soviet Union came to be known as second pole of international politics? After the adoption of Communist Party system, the Soviet Union progressed in every field. In the Second World War, Soviet Union fought against military powers of Germany and Italy with great determination and liberated East European countries with its own regions from fascist forces and brought them under its own control. It emigrated superpowers after the end of the Second World War, and due to its strong influence on East European countries, it came to be known as Second Pole, Second Bloc, and Second World in international politics. And what is the historic significance of Berlin Wall? In 1961, Soviet Union separated Western Germany and Eastern Germany by building a wall with Eastern Berlin, and this was divided Germany stood from 61 to 89. But in around 1989, there was a huge dissatisfaction and public demonstration among the people of nations under communist rule of Eastern Europe with Eastern Germany. The Berlin Wall, which had been built in the height of Cold War and was its great symbol, and was toppled by the people in 1989, and all the communist government of Eastern Europe were ruled out. The natural resources. The economy started reviving in the year 2000. The export of oil, natural gas, and minerals revived most their economies. Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Russia, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan are major oil and gas producers. Other countries allowed oil pipelines to cross their territories, for which they got rent. Some amount of manufacturing also started. Tensions and conflicts. Most of the former Soviet Union republics had conflicts, wars, and insurgencies, and growing involvement of outside powers complicated the situation. And in Russia, two republics of Chechnya and Dagestan had violent succession movements. And indiscriminate military bombing by Moscow have failed to deter the aspirations and also raise the question of human rights. And more tensions and conflicts were in Central Asia. Tajikistan witnessed civil war up to 2001. And the region had many sectarian conflicts as well. The countries and provinces were fighting over river and waters, which led to instability, making life for the ordinary citizens very difficult. And Central Asian republics have vast hydrocarbon resources, which have brought them economic relief. And US wants these regions as bases after the 9/11 attack. In Eastern Europe, Czechoslovakia split into two, Czechs and Slovaks, I told you earlier also, and forming two independent countries, Yugoslavia broke into Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And ethnic Serbs opposed this, and a massacre of non-Serbs followed. And NATO intervened the bombing of Yugoslavia. India has maintained very good relations with all the post-communist countries. Why? Because India was into NAM, because they did not want to be in any of the blocs but adopted both the ideologies at their own level and according to their own requirements. The strongest was with Russia, and we signed 20 years friendship treaty also with them. And Indo-Russian relations are embedded in a history of trust and common interest and are matched by popular perceptions. Indian heroes like Amitabh Bachchan, Raj Kapoor are household names in Russia, and many post-Soviet countries. One can hear Hindi film songs all over the region, and India is part of popular memory there. India and Russia share a vision of multipolar world order and collective security, greater regionalism, negotiated settlement of international conflicts, decision making through bodies like United Nations, and more than 80 bilateral settlements have been signed by India and Russia on energy supplies, Kashmir issue, international terrorism. Both the countries signed agreements with the balancing relations with China. India is the second largest arms market for Russia, and India also imports oil from Russia. Russia is important for India's nuclear energy plans and assisted India's space industry by giving the cryogenic rocket when India needed it. And both the countries have collaborated on various scientific projects. Now, the relevance of non aligned moment. Non alignment moment we have done in the chapter number 9 as well. This was the moment, it was not exactly a moment, but it was a group of a few countries, like those who were developing and those who were newly independent. They did not want to join either of the blocs, nor the Western nor the Eastern. The non aligned movement developed at a time when the Afro Asian countries were emerging out of the long period of colonization. And it was also an era of Cold War between the two power blocs. Newly independent nations dreamed that they should stand on their own legs. They did not want to be the playing of either of the two big powers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Even India was struggling with so many challenges at that time of independence, like unemployment, poverty, education, political, and most of the important thing was spreading the democracy and to make the people about democracy. There are writers and statesmen who say that NAM had no relevance now. Why? Because Cold War ended. With the disintegration of Soviet Union, bipolarity has also come to an end. The process of decolonization is over. All formal colonies or less powerful nations have gained independence. The struggle against apartheid in South Africa and Zimbabwe also, and Zambia and Zimbabwe also ended. And there is a growing trend towards peaceful coexistence and economic cooperation among nations. The question therefore arises, what relevance does the NAM have now? What kind of future is there for the non aligned movement? Many writers think that there are many tasks which non aligned countries like India have to do. The very first thing is the spirit of the non-aligned movement is that the poor and small countries of the world should not lose their sense of identity. They should be free to take decisions that affect their interest without being under pressure from even a superpower like USA. Second, the core issues like neocolonialism and the form of pressure from multinational companies, democracy and human rights are relevant today as ever. Third time is the time NAM countries agree on comprehensive plan to crush international terrorism also, because they are planning to just come forward with the plans to just vanish this international terrorism. And the fourth is with the relaxation of the Cold War, the NAM leaders did not rightly shift their emphasis from political to economic matters. They stress the importance of new international economic order, that is NIEO, and the developed countries of the world have established their hold over International Monetary Fund, World Bank and the World Trade Organization. It is therefore necessary that there were existed a forum when there is discussion about such matters as democratization in the World Bank and the treasure and investment and fighting poverty, hunger, which caused suffering and death. And the relevance of non-alignment movement has a fifth reason also. The NAM has now seriously taken the question of reshaping United Nations Security Council in order to make it a more democratic and a more representative body. And India has demanded many times the permanent membership in United Nations Security Council, and just because of that we have conflicts with Pakistan, we are not getting it. Otherwise, we are fulfilling each and every condition of United Nations Security Council. Sixth is we have had a turbulent time because of emergence of Taliban in Afghanistan and ICI's threatening the sovereignty of Iraq and other nations. And Taliban are still effective and powerful. For a safer world, we have to defeat ISIS completely, and that shows there is still the space for members of the non-aligned movement, especially for countries such as India. Quarrels or warfare between NAM nations such as Indo-Pakistan wars and Tanzania-Uganda war have seriously damaged NAM's prestige. NAM is not a cohesive body. The confusion among its members could be seen on issue like the US decision to wage war on Iraq, Iran nuclear program and Afghanistan crisis. In order to catch up with bold tasks, NAM leaders needed to act wisely. Moreover, they showed work in cohesion with each other. And if thereover, cohesion, NAM can still play a positive role. Let's come back to the questions. What changes occurred in the condition of Soviet Union after the Second World War? Bipolar world emerged after the Second World War, in which Soviet Union was one pole, and economy of Soviet Union was more developed than other countries of the world except America. Soviet Union freed many Eastern European countries from fascist forces after the Second World War, and these came under the influence of Soviet Union political, social, and economical system of these countries were designed as per Soviet system, and they were known as countries of the Second World. And the leader of this alliance was Socialist Soviet Republic, and these countries were joined by Warsaw Pact. And what were the causes of dissatisfaction among republics of Soviet Union? Dominion of one republic over all the institutions, failure of social, economical, and political institutions to meet the aspirations of the citizens, lagging behind in production and technological fields than Western countries, shortage of consumer goods and their production. And what was the effect of shock therapy on the economy of Russia? Shock therapy brought destruction of the economies and people of the entire region. The rate of the inflation was so high that people lost all their savings, and the value the ruble declined dramatically. As a result of shock therapy, about the Russia's 1,500 banks and other financial institutions were bankrupt. And as a result of money, 10,000 corporate and private shareholders was lost, along with the money kept in the bank by customers. And how did India benefit from Russia's friendship? Benefit to India from Russia is like Russia supported India during the Kargil War, and Russia supplied raw material to India for the development of energy sector, and also analyze Soviet Union situation after the Second World War. It became a great power, and Soviet Union progressed in every field. The Soviet economy was then more developed than the rest of the world. Vast mineral and energy resources helped it in its economical development and progress. There was an improvement in the efficiency of transport sector, and even the remote area of USSR were connected within the capital Moscow. It also improved much in scientific sector, and it was successful in sending first space traveler to moon, and it was a leading country in terms of production of nuclear weapons. And everyone in Soviet Union had consumer goods through their quality did not match that of the Western capitalist countries, and yet basic necessities including health, education, childcare were availing to all, and there was no unemployment, and all citizens were ensured of minimum living standards. Why were people dissatisfied with Soviet system? Soviet system was based on the ideology, but after the Second World War, there was an internal dissatisfaction which erupted like fire, and the economic, social, and political lives of Soviet citizens were under the state control, and due to which bureaucracy increased, making life very difficult for its citizens. And the Soviet political system centered around the Communist Party. Thus, no proper system of democracy and freedom of speech was there. The party bureaucrats gained more privileges than ordinary citizens, which increased dissatisfaction among the people, and the bureaucrats and the authoritarians were not answerable to common people. There was a discrimination among the citizens of Russian republics and citizens of other republics, due to which the citizens of other republics felt neglected and often suppressed. And which step of Soviet Union in the period of Benchip led to its disintegration? The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 weakened the system and its economy due to this step. And even after hard practice of 10 years, it couldn't gain full control over Afghanistan. And finally, it had all called back its armies. And invading Soviet Union of Afghanistan resulted in the continuous shortage of consumers, good and food. And the conditions were so miserable that food imports increased every year. Select the correct option for the leader and the country that helped to reach the Tashkent agreement between India and Pakistan. The correct option is USSC and Kozhikode. And which of these following countries had an issue related to migration of Rohingyas? That is, Myanmar had an issue related to the migration of Rohingyas. And the Grand Alliance of the Opposition of 1971. The correct option is got a combined tally of seats that was less than 40. And there was one more aim that Indian leaders were committed to time of independence, and that was democracy. This was end of this video, and hopefully the concept of the end of bipolarity is clear to you all. Please do revise what were the superpowers, and what were the causes of disintegration of USSR, and what were the consequences. Shock therapy is also important. Please go through the video very carefully and use it as a support material. Hope it will help you with your book.